A paragraph is a group of related sentences. This piece of writing has 4 paragraphs. There is no rule as to how many sentences there are in a paragraph. Some paragraphs are long and some are short. Each is as long as necessary. To indicate to the reader that you have begun a new paragraph, one thing you can do is to skip a line. If you're typing your work, just press the Enter key twice to do this. Alternatively, instead of skipping a line, you can indent the first word of the new paragraph. If you're typing, just press the Tab button on your keyboard. So why do we use paragraphs? Well, firstly, it makes your writing more inviting and easier to read. Compare this block of text with the same text organized into paragraphs. I'm sure I know which one you'd prefer to read. Paragraphs also help your reader to understand what is happening in your stories. So when you're writing your stories, when exactly do you start a new paragraph? Begin a new paragraph when there is a change in time, a change in setting, a change in character, and finally, a change in speaker. Let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. A change in time. Imagine you are using a remote control on your story. Whenever you fast forwards or go backwards, begin a new paragraph. Heading backwards in time in your story is called using a flashback. Some common words and phrases that are used to move your story forwards are afterwards, later that morning, hours passed, eventually, the following day. To introduce a flashback, these expressions are often used. It was all coming back. Earlier that morning. Looking back. Back in the day. Something that deserves a special mention is the word meanwhile. It's a good idea to begin a new paragraph when you use this word, and it basically means that you are pausing your story to explain something that is happening at the same time. Let me show you an example from Harry Potter that puts this rule into practice. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there's the change in time. There was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back their door and said, "Anything off the cart, dears?" A change in setting. When you move your story from one setting, such as a forest, to another, like a castle, start a new paragraph. Remember though, that one place can have more than one setting. For example, if your story is set in a haunted house, when your character moves from one room, such as the hallway, into a new room, such as an office, change paragraphs. Treat each new room as a new setting. Let's look at a change of setting in action. Harry jumped back on his Nimbus 2000 and took off. Gliding silently over the castle, he saw Snape enter the forest at a run. He followed. Here's the change of setting. That's why there's a new paragraph. The trees were so thick he couldn't see where Snape had gone. He flew in circles, lower and lower, brushing the top branches of trees until he heard voices. He glided toward them and landed noiselessly in a towering beech tree. A change in character. Whenever a new character is introduced into your story, or an existing character re-enters the scene, begin a new paragraph. Let's look at this in action. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game when the compartment door slid open yet again. But it wasn't Neville, the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. Here comes the change of paragraph. 3 new characters have entered the scene, although the author is going to focus on just one of those characters. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognised the middle one at once. It was the pale boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back in Diagon Alley. A change in speaker. When you have a conversation between the characters in your story, it is crucial that you begin a new paragraph each time the person speaking changes. Here's one. This piece of dialogue writing has no paragraphing, and this makes it very hard to read. At times, it's unclear exactly which character is doing the talking. Here's the same piece of writing, this time with a new paragraph being used each time there is a different person speaking. It's so much easier to read and understand. Let's look at this using a Harry Potter extract. This is a conversation between Harry and his Aunt Petunia. I've highlighted what each character says, although it's easy to follow because a new paragraph has been used each time there is a change of person doing the speaking. Because it's clear who's doing the speaking, the author does not need to keep using a reporting verb, like said Harry or replied Aunt Petunia, which can get boring to read and can interrupt the flow of the conversation. This part, for example, is clearly Aunt Petunia speaking. Up! Get up! Now! Harry woke with a start. His aunt rapped on the door again. Up! She screeched. Harry heard her walking toward the kitchen, and then the sound of the frying pan being put on the stove. He rolled onto his back and tried to remember the dream he had been having. It had been a good one. There had been a flying motorcycle in it. He had a funny feeling he'd had the same dream before. His aunt was back outside the door. Are you up yet? She demanded. Nearly, said Harry. Well, get a move on. I want you to look after the bacon. And don't you dare let it burn. I want everything perfect on Duddy's birthday. Harry groaned. What did you say? His aunt snapped through the door. Nothing, nothing. Make your story writing easier to read, easier to understand, and more appealing by organising it into paragraphs. Remember, start a new paragraph when there is a change in time, there is a change in setting, there is a change in character, and there is a change in speaker.